Hello and welcome to Rain's Kitchen and Garden. My name is Rain. Today I'm making some delicious brown sugar raisin bread. This is part of my bread baking series. I hope you enjoy it. All right, let's make this delicious brown sugar raisin bread. First, I've got in a small bowl, I have a half a cup of warm water. That's 125 mils. I've warmed up the water to 105 to 115 Fahrenheit or 40 to 46 Celsius. And into the water, I'm going to sprinkle 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast. That's about 9 grams. And I'm not just pouring it all in because then it clumps. And it'll take you a lot longer to sort of mix it all up to make sure that the yeast doesn't have clumps in it, because no one wants to bite into a clump of yeast. All right. And I'm going to add just a pinch of brown sugar. In this bowl, I already have measured out my 3 tablespoons for later, or 40 grams. So from my measured out amount, I'm taking a pinch. And I'm just going to sprinkle that in. And with my fork, I'm just going to whip that up, make sure it's all nicely combined. All right, I'm going to cover that with cling film. And I'm going to leave it in a nice warm spot for about 10 minutes until it's nice and foamy. If after 10 minutes you come back and your yeast mixture looks exactly the same and it hasn't started to bubble or foam yet, you probably have bad yeast and you should start all over because your bread will not rise. So we'll check this in 10 minutes. All right, let's check our yeast. Let's see if it's nice and foamy, and I can already see that it is. So that's good yeast, it's all foamy. So I'm going to set that aside for now and take out my big bowl, my really big bowl. That's my lame attempt at doing an impersonation of Ed Sullivan. I amused myself. Okay, so in my really big bowl, I'm going to combine the rest of the warm water. All right. And it's also heated up to 105 to 115 Fahrenheit or 40 to 46 Celsius. And we had a total of 1 1/4 cups of warm water. So what I'm putting in here is 3/4 cups, and I don't know the grams, so or the mils. I'll put that up on the screen so that you can see it. And I'm also going to add the warm milk. I have 1 cup or 250 mils of warm milk. And again, it was also heated up 105 to 115 Fahrenheit or 40 to 46 Celsius, and I'm using whole milk. And in here, I'm going to add some melted butter. I have some unsalted melted butter, and it's cooled. I have 3 tablespoons. That's about 36 grams. Okay, and I'm just going to stir that up. I'm going to add the remaining brown sugar, and I told you before that the amount was 3 tablespoons or 40 grams minus that little pinch. I'm going to stir that up right away to try to get the brown sugar to melt in the warm liquid. And if I see any clumps, I'm going to try to push them down. Okay, now to this I'm going to add salt. I have 1 tablespoon, that's about 18 grams of salt, and I have 1 large egg that I'm putting inside here too. Just breaking up the egg a bit, and I'm going to mix that together with my spatula. And I'm putting in 2 cups of bread flour. 2 cups is about 315 grams. Okay, I'm going to mix that till it's nice and creamy. Always remember to scrape the sides down and the bottom of the bowl too, because sometimes there are pockets of flour that get stuck and they don't get mixed in. All right, that's pretty creamy. So to this, I'm going to add my yeast mixture. Mix that together. And a half a cup of bread flour, that's about 75 grams. And again, let's mix all that up together. Make sure it's well incorporated. All right, now to this I'm going to add my raisins. I have here golden raisins and dark raisins, 3/4 cups each. So that's 140 grams each of golden raisins and dark raisins. I'm going to mix that up. This is going to be so good. I have been really looking forward to trying this recipe. Okay. Okay, now to this I'm going to add the remaining amount of bread flour, a half a cup at a time. Now, a half a cup is 75 grams, and we had a total of 6 to 6 1/4 cups of bread flour, or 940 to 970 grams. But I'll put all the measurements in the description below in the recipe and also on the screen so you can see it. So I'm just going to add half a cup at a time, and I'm doing this by hand. So when it starts to get too difficult for me to mix it with my spatula, then I'm going to turn it out onto my surface and start kneading it to incorporate everything. The original recipe, which I will also leave a link to in the description below, calls for you to use a kitchen mixer with a bread, a dough paddle, I think it's called. I don't have a kitchen mixer, so I've modified it so that I can do it by hand. And I've modified some of the ingredients too to my taste. The original, for example, the original recipe calls for white sugar. I only use brown sugar because I love the taste of it. And I use, I forgot to mention, my milk is whole milk, by the way. Wanted to mention that. Oh, it's starting to get a little hard here to mix with my spatula. So I think it's time for me to turn this out onto my work surface. What I'll do first, though, is I will dump the rest of my flour onto my work surface. And I'm just gonna move it up and make sure I have a little floured surface here so that nothing sticks. And here we go, turning the dough out. It's pretty sticky right now. If you have a kitchen mixer and you are following the original recipe, it says to, as you add the flour a little bit at a time, you're supposed to just let it go for about 4 minutes. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to knead it as I incorporate the last of the flour. And that way, I'm probably going to be kneading it for a good 10 to 15 minutes until it becomes smooth and elastic. All right, so away I go. I kneaded my dough for about 10 minutes, and you know when it's ready when you go like this on the top and listen. It's a little sticky, but it doesn't stick to your hand. You see what I mean? Now I had to actually add about a half a cup. I had another half cup of bread flour because I found that the total of 6 1/4 cups wasn't enough. It was still a little sticky. So I recommend you have a little bit of extra bread flour on hand just to dust on your hands or dust over if it gets too sticky. Now in my large bowl here, I have put about a tablespoon or 2 of light tasting olive oil because we're going to put our dough back into the bowl. There we go. And you can grease your bowl any way you want. I always use light tasting olive oil because I don't like the taste of other oils or of those sprays, you know, like the Pam sprays. So I just flipped it over to make sure that I got oil on every little spot of the bread. I'm going to cover it with cling film, and I'm going to put it in a nice warm spot for 90 minutes because I want this to double in size. Now I'm going to prepare my filling, but first what I did was I buttered my loaf pans. I've got 2 loaf pans here. They're 9 by 5 inches. And I'm going to prepare my filling in a little bowl here. I have 2/3 cup of brown sugar, that's 148 grams. And I'm adding 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, that's about 2 grams. The original recipe calls for a lot more cinnamon, but I always find that, well, just for my taste, it's a little too strong on the cinnamon, so I cut it down by 4. So I'm just mixing all of that up, and this is going to be the filling of our bread. Oops. I just love how this smells. You might hear something simmering in the background, a little bubbling. I'm making another video for fruit ketchup, so that's simmering in the background. It smells so good in my house. All right, I'm going to put that aside for now. Let's take a look at our bread. And it has most definitely doubled in size. There we go. Now I'm going to just flour my surface. And I'm going to turn my dough out onto my surface. It should just, there we go. I was going to say it should just plop out. And it did, because we had that oil. Just going to flour my hands and put it where you can see it. Look at that. Now you could weigh this if you want and then do an exact cut in half. I am just going to eyeball it. You see this? Isn't that neat? That's a little spatula that I got in the hardware store actually. And it works perfectly to cut dough into. But it also works for cleanup if you want to scrape up your surface. Okay, I'm just going to put half aside for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pat that down into a large rectangle. I don't have any measurement in mind. I'm just making it a large rectangle. And I'm going to take half of my filling and sprinkle that on top. Actually, I'm going to use my hands because I want to sprinkle it all over the dough, but I want to keep about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters border on all sides. And again, I'm kind of eyeballing this, but if you want to be more accurate, you can measure what you have in your bowl to divide it evenly between the 2 loaves. Now what I'm going to do is the shortest side here, I'm going to start rolling it up. And I'm going to try to tightly roll it up. we go. Just shove in those raisins. I'm going to pinch the ends just to make sure they're sealed. I'm patting it down just a little bit to make sure that it's even. All right. And if necessary, you can tuck under the ends. If they're pinched well, you don't really have to tuck them under. But what I'm going to do is now put this beautiful loaf into my loaf pan and just press it down a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to do the same thing for my second loaf. Pat it down until it's a large rectangle. My cat's meowing in the background. I don't know if you can hear him. When I'm in the kitchen, sometimes I have to put them in the other room because they tend to jump up on the counters, and they, especially when there's like smells that they like. So they're trying to tell me that they want to be in the kitchen soon. All right. Now I've got the rest of my filling here. Just going to sprinkle that all over. Remember to try to keep 1 inch around the border, just so it doesn't spill out and burn, because the sugar can burn if it's just sitting on the pan. All right, just gonna wipe my hands off so I don't get sugar on all the outside of that loaf. And again, from the short side, just tightly roll it up. Awesome. Let's pinch the ends. Make sure it's sealed. And I'm patting it down a little bit to make sure it's even, so that it will evenly bake. There we go. Take my other loaf pan, and in it goes. There we go. Stick in that raisin. Now I'm going to cover these with cling film and my tea towel, and I'm going to put them in a warm spot so they'll rise for the second rise about an hour. What I'm looking for is that the dough rises to about 1 inch above the edge of the pan, okay? It might take more than an hour. It could take an hour and a half, take 2 hours. It depends on a lot of factors. The humidity in your house, the heat of your house, the type of yeast you used. I mean, there's just too many factors to talk about, but basically you're looking for it to rise 1 inch above the rim of the pan. Okay, so it's been about an hour and 15 minutes. And my raisin bread loaves have risen. I'll show you just on the side here. They've risen over 1 inch above the rim, so I'm pretty happy about that. They're ready to go into the oven. I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 180 Celsius, or gas mark 4. And I'm going to bake these in the oven for about 40 minutes until they're golden brown and the bread pulls away from the sides of the loaf pans. My brown sugar raisin loaves have baked perfectly. They're pulling away from the sides of the pan and they're a nice golden brown. Now I'm going to leave these on the cooling rack for about 15 minutes while they're still in the pan, and then I'm going to turn them out onto the cooling rack and let them cool completely before I dig in. We got a little piece here that fell off, but I'm going to pick that out and eat that right away. There we go. They look and smell lovely. I hope that you enjoyed this video, my friends, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me. And please do leave me a comment. Let me know if you try making this spread. I'd love to read your comment, and I do reply to them. So we'll see you next time on Rain's Kitchen and Garden. Bye!